And then we're just going to go ahead and get ourselves started. So welcome, guys. Welcome to February's FST5 webinar series. We thank you guys for being with us today. First and foremost, before we get started, I would like to send our thoughts and prayers to the Michigan State University family. We know that the tragedy that happened this week has affecting not only the university, the first responders in Lansing, East Lansing as well, but also everyone throughout the state. This really hit us hard having the shooting happen here at a university so close to home. FST5 would like to make sure that we extend our services to all of our first responders and their family members, but we're also here for the community as well. So if anyone has a need to reach out to talk to someone, please don't hesitate to contact us, give us a call, reach out to us if needed. We are here. We are Spartan Strong. And I'm here in the U of M area, so we are Go Blue and Spartan Strong as well. So our thoughts and prayers are with everyone in Lansing today. Okay. So we are super excited for our guest today. Nick Lavery is here with us. We are super excited. His story is amazing, and we are so happy that he's going to share this with us today. But before we get started, before I have Kobe go ahead and do the introductions today, I want to get some housekeeping out of the way. Again, we are Frontline Strong, better known as FST5. We are the leading source of resources, mental health and behavioral health resources for first responders throughout the state of Michigan. For those of you that are new to us, FST5 stands for the 5 disciplines that we serve through this program. So we have police, fire, EMS, 911 dispatch, and corrections. And this is extended to all of these first responder groups, in addition to their families and spouses as well. You can get in touch with us pretty much anytime that you need to. Our crisis line and resource line is 1-833-34-STRONG. Again, that number is 1-833-347-8766. Our website is fst5.org. You can come and check out our website at any time. You can call our resource and crisis line at any time that you need. We are here for you when you need us, okay? So I will pass it over to Kobe, my co-host. Kobe is a part of the FST5 peer team. He'll also give his services that he works, he's a fire peer for us. So he'll introduce himself, and then we will introduce our guests. You have the floor, Kobe.
Thank you, Manisha. My name's Kobe Taylor. I'm with the Peninsula Township Fire Department. I also serve as the founding president for the Northwest Michigan Peer Network. We cover all Region 7, and we partner with the VA, and we cover fire, EMS, dispatch, and just recently started with the ER nursing staff. I got 3 of them that'll be on our team right now, because we know they go through their struggles day in and day out. So our whole mission with Frontline Strong is basically breaking down that stigma with mental health and reducing those suicide numbers. As you know, last year we had the highest suicide numbers with first responders in our state's history. So we definitely don't want to repeat that again. Just to add, if you have any questions for Nick as we go, we have the Q&A box that myself or Manisha would be able to check in and read, or you could raise your hand as well. So let's get started. Thank you for joining us. Tonight I have the honor to introduce our guest speaker, Nick Lavery. Nick was injured overseas during combat where he lost his leg, and even though many told him that it would be impossible to return back to his duty, he still set his mind to doing it. Through resilience, dedication, and the drive, he accomplished his goal where he serves now, and he's an active member with our armed forces. So I'll let you take it away, Nick. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Manisha, Kobe. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me. And before we kind of went live here, we were just talking amongst the 3 of us. I have a distinct pleasure and opportunity to spend considerable time now with members of our law enforcement and first responder communities. And this is unique for me because with this particular organization, you guys are deliberately including our corrections community as well as the 911 dispatches. Both obviously play an enormous role here within our society and keeping it moving forward and safe and secure and providing people help when they need it. It's just so one, it's a great honor for me to be a part of this group. And two, you know, the FST5 community and what you guys are building and having them deliberately built in. This may sound negative. I'll just say they seem to be somewhat forgotten aspects of our community, which is unfortunate. So I give you guys a ton of credit for being that specific about including such incredible humans that are fulfilling such an enormous void and need within our society. So I think, you know, we spoke prior. I think the way that I kind of want to skin this cat here today, I'm going to go about 30 minutes because I really do want to leave ample time for questions. So as Kobe said, if you guys get them and there's a chat there to throw them in there, or you just want to hold off and go live, however the platform tends to work that, I do want to leave ample time for that. So I'll go about 30 minutes. I'll give you guys an introduction and share some experiences that I've been through. And I'm really just going to hammer on one or two points briefly, and then depending on the questions you guys have, we'll kind of navigate the directions that we go in. So as Kobe said, my name is Nick Lavery. I'm an active duty member of the United States Army Special Forces. More commonly, we're referred to as the Green Berets. I've been doing this now coming up on 16 years, which is crazy to say out loud, how fast it just goes by. I mean, I was the brand new cherry nug on the team, running around with my hair on fire, what seems like 5 minutes ago. And now fast forward and I'm in this leadership position, and I got all these young service members and soldiers coming to me asking all these questions. And what's might be weirder is, aside from that happening, is that I tend to actually know the answer, which only just validates the fact that I'm now officially one of the old crusty guys. It's a lifestyle and a profession in which I absolutely love. I have an incredible passion for what I do. And not only that, but I have an incredible sense of purpose behind what I do. And those are two things that we will touch on here again in a couple minutes, but it's important to just voice that aggressively up front. I love what I do. I consider it to be amongst the greatest privileges someone can take on and raise their hand to be a part of, is to pledge an allegiance to a society in which we will defend at all costs. And that is something that I take incredibly seriously, and one that I consider to be an honor. Originally from Boston, Mass. For those of you that haven't already figured that out, I'm pretty sure most in the room probably has. Many may have been thinking New York or New Jersey, where we all tend to be Yankees for anyone that's not from up there, which I can certainly appreciate. I'm still trying to figure out my Southern accents, but still Georgia, Texas, I don't know. They're all just from the South, even though I've been outside of New England for coming up on 16 years. Kind of general information, I'm happily married. My wife is also active duty United States Army as well. She serves as a sergeant major here in the same unit that I'm in. Her and I are both in 5th Special Forces Group here at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. And we both have the privilege and pleasure to be parents to two young boys. Our oldest is 5. Our youngest will be 2 in March, so just next month. Actually, his birthday is on St. Patty's Day. I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse, or maybe both, but I'm sure he's got some wild times coming down the pipe. Let's see. Why did I join the military? It's a fair question. It's a good one. It's an important one. You know, I looked at the military when I was in high school, really, because I didn't have much of a direction. I was a horrible academic. I really struggled socially. I struggled to maintain friends and keep friends. I moved constantly as a young person growing up, and I found a sense of respect and strength that I could be provided through the military. So the Marine Corps became kind of an idea for me early on in high school. Only thing that prevented that from happening was I started getting recruited to play football in college. So I went that route. And then my sophomore year of college was 9/11. And that was obviously a very impactful moment for myself and for most of us that were at least old enough to appreciate the gravity of the situation that we were witnessing in real time. And just the level of anger and frustration that was coursing through my veins made it really difficult for me to stay in school because I knew where things were going and I wanted to be a part of that response. Ultimately, I did listen to some mentors and some friends and family, and I stayed in and I did grind out my degree. And then I began looking at options to come into the military right after that. I knew I wanted to be within the special operations community. I felt that my athletic background would be best utilized in that capacity. But more significantly than that, I really wanted to be at the very front of the fight. I wanted to come in and provide as much value and be the biggest asset that any single human could be while we were surging at this point on two different conflicts, both in Afghanistan and Iraq. I did not come into the military thinking this was going to become a career or a profession or a lifestyle whatsoever. I was going to come in, get some payback, do my time, go overseas, kick some ass, and then I was going to get out and then figure out what it is I was going to do with the rest of my life. Once I was in the game and was in my first deployment into Afghanistan, was when I fell in love with this industry. And I just simply could not imagine doing anything else that even came remotely close to the level of satisfaction and that level of service and brotherhood and responsibility that I was receiving and learning both in real time in that environment. So it was there that I really committed to this longer term. I re-extended my contract for another 6 years on top of what I had left. And that was my new course. It's like, this is what I was put on this earth to do. It really is to be a warrior in this capacity. I got real obsessed with that. And literally all I cared about was being the best Green Beret I could possibly be. There was that. And then there was a mile of nothing. And then there was like my next priorities in life. Everything revolved around that. I was completely all in. On my third trip into Afghanistan, and this is now in 2012, was when things would take a pretty substantial shift in my trajectory and within my lifestyle. I was wounded on that deployment on 3 separate occasions. I'll go briefly here for the sake of time, but by all means, if you guys want the gory details, I'm absolutely comfortable talking about it. If you want to hear about all the blood and the gore and the nastiness, I have really no issue talking about any of these details, both from a physical trauma perspective, mental struggles. I'm an open book here, guys, and I mean that. But I'll go quickly. The first time I was wounded, we were only in country for a few weeks and ended up taking some grenade shrapnel to the back of my shoulder. It blew about a lemon-sized hole in it. Certainly shocking, just to look at your body and see this giant hole that's not supposed to be there. People ask, did it hurt? Was it scary? Was it painful? The answer to all that is really no. And that isn't some machismo tough guy act. It's just when adrenaline is pumping that high and you're in an environment that is that chaotic. I really didn't feel much. It was more of just, oh wow, there's a giant hole in my shoulder that I think someone needs to take care of. We patched it up, plugged it up, continued our mission for the day. Eventually, hours and hours later, I did get medevaced out from where we were operating, got in front of a doctor. He took a look at it, told me how to treat it. I was out of the fight while they kept an eye on me in case there was any signs of infection for about a week. And then I was back with my team, back to business as usual. Just about 6 or so weeks after that was when I was wounded for the second time. This was during an ambush that my team and I had driven into on the back of an operation we had done. And I ended up taking an AK-47 round to the face. Sounds a lot worse than it is. I know that that's not something that you often hear someone tell you that they were shot in the face by a rifle, usually because that person is no longer with us. I obviously got very, very lucky. It really just grazed my cheek. It ripped it open. It was really nasty looking and it bled quite a bit because it clipped an artery in my face. But obviously I got very, very lucky. I was very fortunate, even just another half inch or so, to the right. And I wouldn't nearly be as handsome as I am now. Probably wouldn't be alive. Similar as the first time, I was out of the fight for that, also about a week. I did get in front of a doctor that was at one of our military hospitals that we had in Afghanistan. Took a look at it. He had to cauterize the wound back together, which basically means they take this little mini medical welder and they put it inside your face and like melt the artery back together. Not pleasant. I recommend avoiding that if at all possible. Stitched me back up, and then, I was back with the guys, back to work just a few days after that. So fast forward from that point now, a few months later, and we're still on the same deployment. Now it's March of 2013, and we only have another maybe 2 or 3 weeks left on that deployment before we're going to swap out with the team coming in behind us and head home. And we were ambushed. And the initiation of that ambush was actually from one of the Afghan National Police officers that we had been working with. So this tactic we call a green on blue incident. More commonly outside of the military could be referred to as an insider attack, meaning that somebody that we had been working alongside of, somebody that we were training and going on operations with, turned on us. And this was a very common tactic that was used for quite some time, particularly in Afghanistan, although not exclusive to that location, but because of how successful it was. The Taliban was primarily who we were fighting my time in Afghanistan. And, they realized that while there's some resilient fighters in a lot of those regions, if they can get somebody who has more immediate access to us to initiate an attack, it just drastically increases the likelihood of their success and the damage that they can cause. So that was the case with this. And we were in just an ideal situation for them to do this. A dude jumped up on the back of a Ford Ranger pickup truck that had a mounted PKM machine gun, and he opened fire into me and my team from about 20 feet away, which is extremely close range, particularly with a weapon system that's that strong. I mean, that gun can cause damage out to 500-600 meters. At 20 feet, it's an absolute disaster. And that was the initiation of an actual pre-coordinated complex ambush. So when this guy began firing, we then began receiving machine gun fire and rockets from outside of our compound for about 20-25 enemy fighters. So pretty chaotic situation. That event resulted in 12 American casualties, 3 of which were killed, and another 9 or so Afghans that were either killed or wounded. It is considered the most catastrophic insider attack that we actually have on record. Damage to me was mostly done to my right leg. I took 4 or 5 rounds to my right leg. I took a round to my lower left leg. My femur was shattered. My femoral artery had been severed. I knew how catastrophic my injuries were. Ultimately, I treated myself initially with a couple tourniquets. Teammate eventually got to me. He put a tourniquet on. Neither of those interventions really worked. So ultimately, I ended up grabbing some gauze and ramming it up inside my leg to try to find the femoral artery itself to pinch off that blood flow. And which I did. I got real lucky because I absolutely nailed my femoral artery. I wasn't in front of a doctor for almost 2 hours later because of the ongoing firefight. They just couldn't risk landing a helicopter to come stop picking up the wounded. Eventually I did. About an hour and a half or so later, I got on a helicopter, got medevaced out. They sent us to a location that had what we call an FST, which stands for a forward surgical team, which is basically a group of different medical personnels that have the capacity to conduct medicine in a more austere environment rather than being in a full-blown hospital. They got us there, myself and 2 of my teammates that were most critically wounded. I needed a blood transfusion desperately. The fact that I wasn't already completely bled out was something of a miracle. So I was put on a blood transfusion, and a little bit of time went by and my entire body began to crash. Liver, kidneys, lungs were all shutting down, and they weren't quite certain what the problem was, but they knew I needed to get to Bagram Airfield, which is where we had one of our massive military hospitals at the time. And it was while I was en route to Bagram on another helicopter that they realized that they had given me a blood transfusion with an incompatible blood type, something around 6 units of blood. They were just pumping it into me, which is what caused my entire body to shut down. They realized what happened and they called Bagram Hospital and they said, hey, we just pumped Nick full of an incompatible blood type. There's no way he survives this flight to you guys. So just be prepared to receive his body when he gets there. And in a lot of ways, they were kind of right, because I completely coded on that flight. The med crew on that dust off platform, the medevac platform, were getting real creative with ways to keep me clinging to some sort of life. Panels, shots of adrenaline. They essentially emptied out their aid bag onto me and just started using anything that they thought could potentially work. I get to Bagram. I go straight into surgery. They amputate my right foot immediately. They put me on dialysis, another blood transfusion. I'm intubated. So machine is breathing for me. I have the faintest of pulses that barely exists. You just got that flat line, and then you get the occasional boop, and then nothing, and then boop. And that's the way it really stayed for a few days. Machines were essentially keeping me alive, and I had this extremely faint pulse. And then slowly but surely, I just kind of began to come back, where beep, 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 and then you're back to living and breathing on your own power, slowly but surely. Eventually, I made my way to Walter Reed, which is where I would spend the next year of my life going through. I ended up being around 40 surgeries on my right leg alone. Infection had set in, and that became a real problem. And initially, when I got there, the entire orthopedic staff, all of the doctors, wanted to amputate my leg all the way up to the hip to just get rid of this infection that could actually kill me. Well, the chief of ortho at the time, who's still a great friend of mine, he decided to take a risk, which he and I had a conversation about, where he said, hey, man, I think I can save more your leg, but it's going to be an absolute street fight, and I need you in this fight with me. And I can tell you, I'm in the intensive care unit, still in critical condition. I had no idea medically what this guy was saying to me. All I really heard was, hey, dude, do you want to go get into a fight? And I was like, yes, let's go do that. And he's like, okay, cool. So that began my regimen. And I was in surgery, usually 3, sometimes 4 times a week. And they were just incrementally amputating my leg higher and higher and higher, inch by inch, cutting out dead meat, tissue, muscle, bone. 40 surgeries later, and it left me really with what I have today, which is a femur that's about 4 inches in length. Once I get past that, then okay, cool. Here's your prosthetic. Let's start figuring this thing out, how to live life as a one-legged guy, how to begin operating a prosthetic leg. Obviously, that was extremely challenging. And what's really important to know, because this is the emphasis I want to place here on this engagement, is while I was in the intensive care unit, going through what I just described, I'm on all of the pain meds, right? Because I'm in and out of surgery. I'm on a ton of pain management drugs. I'm on ketamine, Dilaudid, morphine, in and out of anesthesia. I mean, I'm like seeing pink elephants floating through my room, like a total drugged out, constantly in surgery, just disaster. It was at that point that I knew what my mission was. I had set my sights on what my mission is, and that is to get back to my lifestyle. And even in those early moments, remaining in the Army on active duty was unacceptable. Remaining within Special Forces as a Green Beret was also unacceptable. The only outcome that would be deemed acceptable was getting back to my team and getting back into combat as a Green Beret. Period. All stop. That was it. From those extreme early points of time, that became my vision and that became my mission. Year goes by, I'm at Walter Reed. I return back to my unit, which at the time was at Fort Bragg. I was in 3rd Special Forces Group. I had a meeting with my command team, and they asked me, what are you trying to do? And I told them exactly what I just told you guys. I said, I'm going back to the team. And they said, okay. They did their best to hold back the crazy looks that they wanted to give me. A one-legged guy walks in the group commander's office and says, welcome back. It's great to see you. And you say, I'm going to go back to my team and go back into Afghanistan. He did his best and actually did a really great job. He kept keeping a straight face. He said, okay, roger that. I don't think that that's something that we can do now. And I said, no, sir, not at all. I have quite a bit of work in front of me. I'm just letting you know where things are going here. He said, okay. I said, in the meantime, I'd like to take a job as an instructor teaching combatives. Combatives is a fancy word for hand-to-hand combat that we use in the military. It was a great fit for me. I grew up doing combat sports, boxing, wrestling, MMA, something I really enjoyed. And I thought that it would be a way that I could continue to provide value to my unit. And it's a physical job. And I had a lot of physical hurdles I needed to get past. So it would have been a win-win for me. He granted me that request. So then I began working as an instructor, teaching classes every single day. And at this point is when I began going through my medical evaluation board with the United States Army, right? That process that gets initiated following an event that can almost certainly or more than likely prevent you from doing whatever your job is. So for me as a Green Beret, that list of tasks that are necessary to do is quite long and distinguished. My med board took 8 months, and the Army tried their best to have me forced medically retired. I had to really dig in, refuse the answer no, several times. I learned through that process that just about anything in the Army is possible as long as you get the right person to put their name on a piece of paper. That's really what it takes. So I had to dig in and throw some punches. Ultimately, I won that fight and I was able to stay on active duty. Okay, cool, perfect. After that is when I said, okay, to my chain of command, what's it going to take for me to get back to the team? And during this time period of this medical evaluation board, and while I'm going through working as an instructor, I'm living a lifestyle in which most people would consider to be insane. When I say I burned the boats on this, I mean that as literal as it can get. There was no plan B. There was no backup option. There was no contingencies. It was one of two things is going to happen. I'm going to be successful at this mission, or I'm going to die trying, and I'm perfectly okay with either of those two outcomes. Literally all in. And my lifestyle reflected that. Any single thing that had normally been in my life, that includes hobbies, tasks, actions, and people that were not enabling and supporting what my mission was, were completely and totally removed. Every single task that was within every single 24 hours of every single day was all rooted in the same exact thing. And that's getting back to my team, getting back to my lifestyle. That's it. And I learned during that process that it is considerably easier to remove an hour of Netflix a night, for example, than it is to remove a person from your life that you may have had a long time relationship with. That's really difficult to do. The Netflix is simple compared to that. That in itself can be a challenge. But you want to talk about removing relationships. That's exceedingly more difficult in my experience. But those decisions did have to be made. I had to remove the energy drainers from my circle. And many of that at the time was going to be temporary. And, once I'm successful or once I'm dead, maybe we can rekindle this. But for now, I have to separate myself from you. I actually never picked any of those things, any of those relationships back up, so I can look back now with zero regret. Although difficult at the time, I can look back now happy that I was able to make those really difficult choices and really be extremely deliberate with who I allowed to be within my community. My unit eventually said, okay, here are the things that we need you to do. And it ended up being about a 12-week phase where I was doing a variety of different tests and assessments, usually 2 or 3 per week, to demonstrate my ability to be back on the team and go back into that kind of environment. And these guys threw the kitchen sink at me. I mean, a lot of it was physical, but then there was also proficiency evaluations, cognitive assessments, another psychological screening. They really did test me on just about anything that you could imagine. And rightfully so. You know, there had never been a one-legged guy to go back to a special forces team to go back into combat. And, you know, like anything that's never been done before, there's typically a lot of questions and concerns and surprise, all of which happened with me. At the end of that 12 weeks, I was ultimately deemed successful, and I was given the approval to return back to my team, which I did, the same team that I was on when I was wounded. And about 6 weeks after that, we were back in Afghanistan conducting full spectrum combat operations. Since then, not a whole lot has changed. I've been promoted a bunch of times, which, you know, really just kind of happens in the Army as long as you don't mess things up too bad. It just kind of runs its course. So I've been promoted a couple of times. Okay, cool. I've deployed to combat a bunch of times as an amputee, and as well as to other areas for operational purposes. And, you know, I'm going to continue doing what I do for as long as I'm an asset to the people to my left and right. And it took me a while to explain it the way I just said that, because I used to just say, I'm going to do this for as long as I can. But really it's about being that asset and providing that consistent daily value. And, you know, there is a shelf life on how long you can live this life. It takes its toll, both physically, mentally, with your family, spiritually. It does run its course. So as long as I'm able to provide that value and be that asset to my teammates, I'll continue doing what I do now, because again, I love what I do now. And I know with certainty that I was put on this earth to do this. A lot of people struggle with their why, and that's what we're going to get into here in a second. Like, what is my why? Like, why am I here? What am I doing here? And a lot of people find themselves kind of floating through life, perhaps never finding that, or perhaps finding it in their 70s. And it's like, oh man, like that's who I am. That's why I'm here. I've been blessed to find that relatively early in life, and have been able to live it now for the last going on 16 years. What I just described is obviously pretty broad and from a 30,000-foot view. What I can tell you is it was really difficult, as I'm sure that won't come as a surprise. It was really hard. Even those that know me really well, even my family, my friends, some of my teammates, although on the surface they were extremely supportive and in my corner, both figuratively and literally, no one really thought what I had set my sights on doing was possible. And that's to be expected. And that's okay, because it hadn't happened before. You know, it's the first time anyone does anything, it's going to catch people off guard. And while those intentions may be made clear, it's very easy to say, yeah, okay, you know, good for you, good luck, but like that's not going to happen. So there were countless times where even when I had someone literally next to me, I had to become extremely comfortable in solitude. And while this becomes a very interesting conversation, because there's an enormous value in, again, that community and who we surround ourselves with, and being very deliberate about who we attach to and who we have as mentors and who are our allies, who are our teammates, who are we grooming, right? Who are our proteges? This is incredibly impactful. There's an enormous power that comes with the sense of community. Concurrently, I found that for me to make the progress that I needed to make, I had to become extremely comfortable in isolation. I had to make it so that I was my own worst enemy, that I would inflict more damage and I would push myself harder than anyone else could possibly around me. I would weaponize my mind so that no one could inflict enough stress on me as I did on myself. And that mostly was done really early mornings, the really late nights, kind of these cliche time periods when it's just me versus me, when it's me versus my character, when it's me and just my integrity, when I could easily go at 50% and no one would know the difference. Like the ability to put in that level of work ethic and dedication in the dock when no one else is around, because it's considerably easier to do that when the lights are on, right? When the coach is there, or when the teacher, or when your friend or your boss or your kids or your wife, or even the people who are rooting against you, like your haters, when they're there and they're watching, our pride and our desire to either do well for them or do well in spite of them is going to make it easier to work at that capacity. When no one is there, though, and it's just you, and you are still able to produce that kind of effect, that is what I've determined to be an enormous aspect of the part of the how question. How did you do what you did? And it's the hunger and being starving for that goal. And when you're in isolation and solitude, you still are able to go at that same capacity. It's a lonely road. And and again, even though I was surrounded by amazing human beings that supported me in so many different ways, it was still lonely because I was navigating through this road that hadn't been created yet. And oftentimes with ambition comes being misunderstood, and having to have an extremely firm grasp on why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing. That is what enabled me to continue to move forward despite all that. Okay. And when you're getting, feedback from people who you respect immensely and you trust and you love, they're saying, hey man, like, I think maybe you want to start looking another direction. To be able to take that openly and say, thank you, I appreciate your feedback. And then also still maintain laser focus on what it is that you believe is where you're meant to be going. And that's really what I want to emphasize here before I open up the floor. And I have this mindset kind of model that I use, and it was really one that was created in real time. It was very fluid in nature and retrospectively analyzed. And I use the warrior ethos to kind of frame that, to create what I call a warrior mindset. And I'll just go through them extremely quickly. And the first one is, I will always place the mission first. And what that translates to anybody is the word discipline. If I'm saying I will always place the mission first, I'm talking about discipline, the ability to do what needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not. There is a reason why I put that at the absolute beginning of this as the absolute foundation, because without it, it's impossible. That's a strong word, but if you only execute when you feel like it, you will lose. You will lose. The person, hopefully that is you, that is willing to do what is necessary regardless of wanting to, that is how sustainable progress is ultimately created. So that's how I will always place the mission first. It means discipline. The second one is I will never accept defeat. And the word this translates into is resilience. When I say I will never accept defeat, there's a reason why it's defeat and not failure. And this may be considered a play on words, but they are two very different things. And we talk about resilience here. It's the ability to get back up after losing, the ability to get back up after getting knocked down, after the failure, and recognizing the value that exists within failing, within getting it wrong. That is quite literally where the wisdom is located, where the knowledge is. And if we could put our pride and our ego aside and take on an enormous slice of humble pie and be willing to extend into that realm where failure is almost certain, that's how we get better. It's by getting it wrong so many times, right? Thomas Edison said, I just found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. But he only needed one way that actually worked. So you could say that while Thomas Edison failed 10,000 times, that's what it took to find the right way to do it. So resilience, we say I will never accept defeat. We're talking about resilience, mental toughness. The third is I will never quit. And this really translates into persistence. And there's definitely an overlap between persistence and resilience, right? Because persistence is continuing to move forward in the face of adversity, which certainly requires a certain degree of resilience. But persistence also applies when you talk about continuing to move forward, despite achievement, despite accomplishment, despite reaching milestones. It's the idea of getting 1% better every day forever, no matter what. Satisfaction ceases to exist. Even when you reach that next ridge line and you reach that mountaintop, and by all means, is there a reward worthy and celebration? Absolutely. But then quickly zeroing in on the next objective to secure, right? So persistence is the dedication to continue to advance, whether that's in the face of adversity and or accomplishment. And then the last one is, I will never leave a fallen comrade. And that also translates to one word, and that's commitment. An ironclad, non-negotiable contract that we establish with ourselves. And this is one that us in the military, and I'm quite certain within the military or the law enforcement first responder and this entire FST5 community, one that we, in the literal sense, take very seriously. And those of us in the military do as well. Excuse me. Meaning that I will not leave you behind under no circumstances. I cannot guarantee that I will bring you home alive, but I do guarantee that I will bring you home. And that is a non-negotiable contract. That is a commitment that we make with ourselves and with each other and with our team. So the term commitment as it applies to life in general, regardless of what you do as for a profession, is a willingness to do whatever it takes. And more specifically, a willingness to do whatever it takes by any righteous means necessary. I think that last portion is extremely important because it also highlights the incredible value and need for integrity and living by a certain set of values to be successful and tenacious and relentless, but doing so as a good person at the same time without stepping on the heads of those around you so that you can reach that next line or that next ridge. So those are the 4 ethos. I'll always place the mission first. I'll never accept defeat. I'll never quit. I'll never leave a fallen comrade. And again, it's discipline, resilience, persistence, and commitment. And while I have entire curriculums that covers all 4 of these, it's very easy to overlook the incredibly important first part of that. Because if you're always going to place the mission first, you need to know what the mission is. What am I placing first? And that's what I want to emphasize here with this group for the next 5 or 10 minutes, and I'll open it up for questions. What is the mission? Okay, when I say mission, I'm saying, what is the goal? What are we doing here? What are you trying to do? Or maybe a better way to ask it is, who are you trying to become? I'm in a position now where I just get thousands of messages through different social media platforms, emails, and a lot of people asking for advice, which is amazing. And I'm humbled and honored by that. 99% of the time, my response is, what is your goal? What are you trying to do? That is incredibly important. And I mentioned how I had my vision on going back to the team as a Green Beret. That was my mission. And during the countless moments of fear and pain and failure and setbacks and frustration and self-doubt, which I experienced on most days, countless times, that was the one thing that I could continuously grasp onto. It was the one thing that I had to continuously grasp onto. In those moments of self-doubt and pain, when it seems like the world is crashing down and you have set your sights on something that is actually impossible, what is it that's going to get you up and keep you going forward to continue to attempt what you just did or divert to something else that is also in line with progression? And it's the vision of what my mission was. Absolutely essential. And I'll add that if it is something that is not deeply rooted in both passion and purpose, I will go ahead and say that it is going to be extremely difficult to turn that vision into a reality because the adversity is coming. You are going to get it wrong. You are going to fail. You are going to get knocked off track. It is absolutely inevitable and essential, again, in my opinion, because that's where a lot of the knowledge is, but it will happen. So if we consider this to be an inevitability, getting it wrong, messing it up, failing, reaching points of contention and adversity, if we accept the fact that this is a foregone conclusion, what is going to keep you moving forward in the face of all that? And if it's something that you're moving towards that you are not in love with and also feel a connection with, then I'll describe passion versus purpose. Passion is the love of the game, okay? Forget about the prize. I'm talking about a love of the process. And as much as I love being able to put a Green Beret on my head, I'm talking about having a passion for earning a Green Beret every day, even during the things I need to do that absolutely suck, that I want nothing to do with. It's a passion for the game, more so, drastically more so than the prize at the end. That's passion, as far as I'm concerned. Purpose is, what is your soul pulling you towards? Why are you here? I can tell you without question that life is an absolute gift. People, I've been on all sides of death. Okay. I've administered it. I've been alongside my friends as they drifted off, and I've been as close to death as it really gets. This entire thing that we're living here right now can be over in a moment's notice. Boom. And statistically speaking, the fact that we are us now is as close to the definition of a miracle as it actually gets, right? Something that is essentially impossible without divine intervention. Depending on what math you want to go with, the likelihood of you being you is like 1 in 600 trillion. I mean, it would be, you have better luck of winning the lottery 400 times in one lifetime than you do of existing as yourself now. So it's really hard to see life that we live as anything other than a gift. But why are you here? What's the point? What is your purpose? Defining a mission that is in line with both of those things, I feel to be incredibly important. Okay. So what's my recommendation on how to determine what the mission is? And I'll throw this out there, and then I'll pause for questions. I have 2 recommended courses of action on how to identify what that mission is, what that purpose is, what that passion is. It's somewhat unorthodox, which I'm kind of proud of. The first, I'll just use the term, it's done through reflection. Okay. It's done through the establishment and commitment to an internal dialogue in which allows your soul to tell you why it is you're here. Okay. And there are many techniques that can enable this. Meditation, journaling is one I'm huge on, or just simply looking in the mirror and saying, what do you want to do? Who do you want to become? And then closing your mouth and listening. Because oftentimes that sense of purpose, that answer to that why, is not going to come blasting through the glass and punch you square in the face. It could very easily show up in the form of a whisper. But if you're not listening, you will not hear it. So allow yourself to determine what that is internally, which again, I think is done just through the establishment and maintenance of an internal dialogue. This isn't going to happen on its own. Right? This is training, guys. This is work. You commit to it or you don't. It's entirely up to each of us to decide. And when I say look in the mirror and say that, I mean literally. I mean, I have had that exact discussion with myself thousands and thousands of times. What do you want to do? Who do you want to be? Okay. And again, I do a lot of journaling that helps that conversation develop. The second course of action is more often than not recommended by a lot of coaches that are out there, or advisors that are out there. And that's to focus on our talents. Focusing on our talents is a way to hone in on what that passion purpose actually is. When I say talent, I'm talking about inherent skill, right? And the difference between talent and skill, right? Talent you're born with, skill is earned through thousands of hours of dedication to a particular craft. You think of talent, you could think of the things that you do best with the least amount of effort. Everybody has at least one, because there is going to be something that you do best with the least amount of effort. And by honing in on what that is, that can provide some direction for us to pursue. The reason, and yes, that does increase the statistical likelihood of success, because if you already have talent and you lay a skill on top of that, the chances of being overall successful obviously goes way up. I just have an issue with putting that as number one, because I have a problem with limitations. And let's just say that I want to build homes for people. Deep in my heart, in my soul, that's what I want to do. I just so happen I can't stack 2 blocks on top of each other without them toppling over. I can't hammer a nail into a board without smashing my thumb. But does that mean that I can't build homes for people? I have no talent whatsoever, but who's to say I can't do that anyway? I would argue nobody, right? So that's why I like to prefer having a reflection course of action as primary to determine what that mission is, to determine what that purpose and that passion actually is, and putting the talent course of action as number two, because eventually we do need to get the ball rolling. We do need to start working towards whatever it is. So week after week, month after month, you're doing all the stuff, you're having the conversation, you're doing the journaling, the meditating, like nothing's coming up. Okay, maybe now we shift and start asking a different question. What do I do best with the least amount of effort? Because there's also the high likelihood that that actually is something that we really do love and something that is actually rooted within our soul to pursue. The identification of a mission, I cannot stress this enough, is going to be the thing that we grasp onto when the adversity sets in, when the failure sets in. And having that mission defined and continuously refined with a high degree of clarity is going to be what we leverage when it really gets hard. And it is going to get hot. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to let Kobe or whomever take the con. If you guys have questions, whether it's specifically to what I was just talking about or totally off the wall, I'm at your disposal.
Oh my God, Nick, that was amazing. Thank you so much. We definitely have questions. I'll go ahead and read off the first one. It says, how did you convince yourself to go back after each time getting injured?
How did I convince myself to go back? There really wasn't any convincing that needed to be done, because that's exactly where I wanted to go and where I needed to go to do what it is I do. So there was no need to convince myself. I will just say, and this may be part of the question, I had put in considerable effort to build my confidence back up to be an asset to my team. And that was done prior to deploying through an enormous volume and high degree of intensity in which that I lived and trained. And then once I got over there back into that deployed environment, I realized that I had a lot of learning still left to do. So it's really quite simple. The identification of a gap or weakness that needs to be strengthened, and then the development of some kind of system or plan or scheme to go about working on those deficiencies. And that's extremely easy to say. It's entirely different to actually execute and live. And without an enormous sense of humility, that won't happen. If our pride gets in the way and says, like, it doesn't let us become vulnerable enough to recognize the deficiencies we have to then put in the work against. So that definitely took quite a bit of time and effort. And I just had to be real honest with myself. And fortunately, I live in a world of absolute candor and extreme bluntness, that I'm surrounded by guys that are very quick to point out when something's lagging. So I was able to weaponize my community, because I was not only I didn't have to solely rely on myself to recognize where things needed to happen. I had 10 other guys around me constantly being like, hey, dude, I think you need to work on this, or let's work on that, or let's work on that. So that collective effort was a huge aspect of my ability to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to go back to what you're saying about getting rid of those negative influences that you might have that might take you off course from your mission. And I think as responders in a weird schedule, we work, doing 24-hour shifts, and you just working weekends, holidays, all that good stuff. You lose those friends you once had very quickly, because they're like, man, you never want to go out on the weekend. You don't ever have days off and stuff like that. So you learn real quick who's going to support you in time needs. So definitely just want to touch on that. We do have a question from Gil Wilson. After all the trials and tribulations from a medical aspect, do you feel your health, i.e., such as liver or kidneys, been affected by all trauma and medications taken? Or are you feeling pretty good or stronger? Thank you. And divers are the 0.1%.
Yes, combat divers are amongst the 0.1%. That is true. I feel great. I think that was part of your question. Is there a likelihood or certainly a possibility that hormonally my physiological system or some of my organs may have experienced some trauma that cannot be recovered from, that may show their symptoms at some point? Probably. Even just like conditions not specific to these events I shared with you guys, but just, you do 10,000 door breaches internally, like that takes its toll on the human body. So while I feel great and all of my physicals and lab work and everything is right where it's supposed to be, I'm also, I guess, wise enough, because I've been around this game for long enough now to know that you do choose to take on, the risk of what things look like 20 years down the line if you decide to live a life as a special forces operator in a time of conflict. And I went into this with both eyes wide open even back then, and I continue to do so now. So whatever that may end up looking like, I can tackle that with no regret, because again, I'm living my why right now. But to answer your question, I appreciate your concern or your interest in my overall health. I feel great, man. I just turned 40 this past September. Actually, I just got labs like a couple weeks ago, and everything's right where it's supposed to be. And it doesn't happen by accident. Like my health is a top priority, both physical and my mental. And I dedicate considerable time and energy and into different resources to maintain that, which I'm more than happy to talk in more detail about. But that's an investment that also doesn't just happen on its own. You want to commit to this life and beat your body and your brain and your mind and your emotions. You want to put all that through the ringer, and you want to live a long, healthy life where you can spend time with your grandkids. You better invest in your wellness, both physical, mental, and otherwise. And I say invest, I don't mean, prayer and the law of attraction. And I'm all for that kind of stuff. And, speaking your truth forward to the universe or a higher power. I mean, rolling up your sleeves and actually working and digging your feet in and working and committing towards that. That's an investment that no one will make for you other than you. So this is a whole nother topic, but those of us that live a life of service, all right, and this is important for this group. And Gil, I appreciate the question. I'm going off on a tangent real quick, but those of us that live a life of service, we live by a series of values and ethos. Selfless service is one that I am absolutely positive resonates with every single person that's in this chat right now. Selfless service, okay? Because of that, which is incredibly important, but because of that, it can become very difficult for us to prioritize ourselves, okay? It can feel selfish if we do that, if and when we do that. If you do not prioritize yourself at times and at often times, you will be of no use to your community in which you want to serve. Your family, your friends, your teammates, the community in which you protect, and you need to be in a good place to be valued to them. So by prioritizing yourself and your own wellness, you are in fact living a selfless life, because you are building yourself up to be a value to them. So I share this when I talk to law enforcement, first responder, military type communities, because we are engrossed in this level of service to our community and our team, and we live it. And it can become very easy for us to deprioritize our own wellness. All right. So my challenge that I'll throw out there to this group is to prioritize yourself. All right. Prioritize yourself, get yourself where you need to be, and get yourself on a road of consistent improvement to be a better means of service to those that you care for.
I love that. Absolutely. Okay. Next question is from Anonymous, and they say, how have you coped with others, i.e. family, who wanted you to take other options?
Family who wanted me to take other actions.
Other options.
Oh, options.
Yeah, options. So maybe not go back into the military.
Yeah, I've coped with it fine. I always knew that, my family would support me and love me regardless. I'm extremely blessed to have that in my life. And while they may not have agreed with what I said I was going to do, mostly based out of fear, which I can understand, I knew that they would support me, even if I was doing something that they didn't agree with. When I first told my father that I was joining the United States military to become a Green Beret, I was 24 years old. I just graduated college. I told my dad, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to join the Army. I'm going to become a Green Beret." His response was, "No, you're not." As if he could like ground me and send me to my room like I was 9 years old. He's like, "Absolutely not. You're not doing it." I'm like, "Dad, like, dude, I love you and I respect you. I'm not asking your permission. I'm a grown man. I'm just telling you what I'm doing." And he's like, "No, no, no, no," completely against it, based out of fear. And now, even though my sons are young, I can still empathize with that entirely. Right. So, and now he's my biggest fan. He reads all the books and he speaks the language and, all the stuff. So, I've had no issue coping with it. I'll tell this quick story. My now wife, we had really just started kind of our courting phase, if you want to use that term, while I was in the hospital at Walter Reed. Okay. I mean, which I'm incredible. It was really hard, but I'm really grateful for it because our relationship began when I was at my absolute lowest point ever. And she became an absolute angel and an asset and a teammate for me. It still is. When I got out of Walter Reed after a year, I moved in with her back at Fort Bragg. And I was there maybe a week, maybe two. And I sat her down and I said, "Hey, babe, here's the deal. This is the lifestyle that I'm going to be living." And I showed her an outline of what a single day would look like. And this was regimented to the minute. Okay. Like wake up 0330, the 0335, eat this, 0340, do this. I mean, literally to the minute. This is what I'm going to live. And I will not deviate from this for any reason. And what that means is, I will not be going to any weddings. I will not be going to any funerals. We won't be going out to any dinners, like nothing. This is all that I'm going to do. And I understand if you don't want to be a part of that. I was fully anticipating her saying, "You're out of your mind and I don't want anything to do with this." We really had just started talking, Fortunately, is an understatement. She was able to stay by my side. Not only that, but be an enormous asset. And I look at the life we have now with two young boys. I'm incredibly blessed, just with so much gratitude for her strength and ability to do that. But my point here is, I went into that conversation willing to accept and willing to sacrifice what I knew was real. Okay. I knew that our love was real. I could see the white picket fence and the dogs and the kids 10 years down the road. I could see all that. I knew that what her and I had in that moment was very, very real. And I was willing to let that go. If she had said, "I can't be a part of this," I would have said, "I completely understand. I wish you the best of luck." And I'm driving on. When I was to that degree of obsessed with what I had to do. So, again, fortunately, it didn't play out that way, but my ability to cope with it then, as well as now, at times certainly could be challenging, but that vision of where I needed to go is what allowed me to do that, really in the face of difficult times with those that I actually care about.
Excellent. Next question is from Ashley Freeman, who's actually new on my team on the EMS side and going to school for social work. So she's going to be busy. How did you keep your goal being back with your team, with being the first to ever do that, with regards to having people tell you that it won't happen? I know being the first to do anything comes with its challenges.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can answer this with one word, and that's the word faith. It's the word faith, which certainly has a really strong, biblical, religious feel and sense to it. One of the definitions of faith is a firm belief in something for which there is no proof. And I believed to my core that what I had set my sights on was possible. And it didn't matter who agreed with that, because I agreed with it, and it was unwavering. There was no one, it was impossible for someone to convince me of anything otherwise. I was either going to do it, or I was going to I would be the one to prove that it was impossible. But that really was it. So yes, it comes with its challenges. Yes, again, it's a lonely road. Yes, one of the many costs of ambition is being misunderstood and labeled, as boring or a buzzkill, right? Like Kobe said, like, you got your friends like, hey, it's Saturday night, let's go out and get a drink. And you're like, I can't, I'm going to the gym, or I've got homework to do, or I'm going to study on this thing, or I'm going to work on this project for work, or I'm going to spend that time with my kids, or like whatever task is there on purpose, which is in line with you reaching that mission success. Like, that is what you are going to execute upon. You're willing to make those sacrifices that most are not. You're willing to sacrifice the night out. You're willing to sacrifice the couple beers, right? You're willing to sacrifice the slice of pizza. And I could break this thing down to like the millisecond. And these opportunities are in front of us literally constantly. Every moment is another opportunity to either pivot or to remain dedicated to what it is you set your sights on. And I talked about the importance of discipline, and, the ability to make those really difficult sacrifices and give up on something that you are blessed to have in that moment. Say no to the things you are fortunate to have, even if it's something that you may have earned. That degree of dedication is what propels us to success, to greatness, to being elite, to excellence. Call it what you want. So yeah, one of the many aspects of that is living that lifestyle. But then as it pertains to us externally and those around us, and, the judgments or the labeling, it's, I couldn't hear it. It didn't make a difference to me. And this doesn't come from a place of like FTW. I got my hoodie on and like, I'm intentionally just ignoring the whole world. Like, they were around me. I learned to respect someone's opinion and concurrently ignore it at the same time.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, our questions are coming in, so we're going to keep going with the questions.
Let's do it.
Okay. The next up is from Steve Heim. He's a part of the FST5 family. Can you talk about the behavioral health component? How did you handle anxiety or depression during your recovery?
Words mean things. I think you said the name was Steve. Words mean things, man. And I try to be very deliberate with my language when I talk about this, that I do not feel that during my journey, I experienced depression. That I can say. I certainly was never diagnosed with it. I certainly never felt like I was depressed from a clinical perspective. Were there times that I was sad and tired and beat up and sore and lethargic and dragging ass? 1000%. Yes, that definitely experienced those waves of emotion. And then anxiety, were there times I was anxious? Yes. Were there times that I was so anxious to the point that it became debilitating for me? I just didn't experience that to that degree. This is something that I'm not proud of, because I don't see there being any shame whatsoever if and when that happens, particularly on the offset of dealing with some kind of trauma. That's more than expected. All right. I know personally some of my closest friends that are some of the most elite warriors walking on this face of the earth right now that experience all of this stuff. All right. They experience depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress. They're, seeking different types of treatments to deal with these things. These are warriors that I've been alongside doing some amazing things that defies what the human body is capable of doing. And that's okay. That's more than okay. That's almost to be expected if you decide to do what we do at that degree of intensity and frequency for that amount of time. And the human brain, the human mind, like, has breaking points that are beyond our control. If you start talking hormones and physiological responses and, all these things. So there's no shame when that happens. Therefore, I'm not proud whatsoever to say that it didn't happen to me. There's almost a weird part of me that almost wish it did, that I experienced it, so I could talk more intelligently and be that much more empathetic because I lived it. I just didn't go down a real dark, negative road really at any point. At no point did I struggle with any kind of substances. At no point did I have any kind of suicidal ideations or thoughts. A lot of moments of despair and reaching my breaking point countless times, and fear and doubt and all that. But I was able to move past those moments in time relatively quickly in the beginning. And then as my resiliency, which is a skill, as that skill began to build and become sharper, really it was my response time to getting back on a positive track. That's really what changed over time. It's not that the immediate reaction didn't exist. Like, something goes wrong and it's like, like anger or frustration or sadness. Like, you get hit with that emotion. That's part of us as human beings. Like Dale Carnegie says it best, human beings are not creatures of logic. We are creatures of emotion. There is an emotion attached to literally every single thing that we do. Right. So like that would still hit me. But the skill in which I was able to build over time was how fast it took me to get a hold of that emotion and gain control of it, and then determine what my action would be following that emotion. That's the skill of resilience that I was able to build as I was going through all these trials. And just, you could feel it and see it, that the same thing would happen, only I would get just as frustrated or just as angry or just as sad or just as disappointed or just as insert your emotion, the same. But how long it took me to gain control of that is what was reduced over time.
Awesome. Thank you. We got another one, Mariah Guernsey. She's one of our dispatchers on my team. Phenomenal asset for us. You touched on how you will follow your mission until you are no longer an asset to those to either side of you. Have you set a hard line in the sand that tells you when it is time to step away and find a new mission?
It's a great question. The Army kind of sets a line in the sand for us, and that's that 20 years is when you've reached that point where you can retire with, your full benefits from service. So that line exists. The Army puts it there for me. I'm in a unique position, because it is, unfortunately it's unique, but it is, where I've already identified what my next purpose is. Once I hang up the uniform, once I'm no longer in military service, I know what my next mission is. And in fact, it's one that I'm living already. In fact, I'm living it literally right now as I'm spending time with you guys. A lot of military service members, they struggle with transition. It's a huge catalyst that can cause a lot of catastrophe in people's lives, because they become so rooted in, this is who I am, which I can appreciate, because I live that as well. That when that time ends, they're left floating around. Like, I don't know what to do with myself. And that can get ugly pretty quick. I've already determined what that is. And I'm slowly, nights and weekends style, passion project style, building that foundation now. So once I do retire, whenever that may be, I just step right into, that role full time. When will that happen? It's a fair question. It certainly won't be before the 20-year mark, barring something just crazy happening. So I'll go to 20. I've had my sights set on that number for quite some time as a personal and professional goal. I think the real question is, how long do I stay in beyond that point? And it's really difficult to answer it, because one, things operationally for us in the military, we're going through the kind of a wild series of transitions. When I came into this business 2007, and we were surging on two fronts. And then, Syria kicked off, and I'm talking about kind of the more well-known military conflicts that we've been in. That the times have changed, and there's a lot of really good things about that change happening. Walter Reed is almost out of business, which is a good problem to have. When I was there, that place was booming with people. So it's an interesting time. It does open up opportunity to, influence and provide value in different ways, in which I'm learning how to do now that we're no longer in the same type of combat and conflict that we were for the last 20 years. And it's something I'm surprisingly enjoying. So I think as long as I continue to wake up in the morning, I'm excited to put my uniform on and go to work. I think that that's a good indicator that I'm still in a good place. My greatest challenge, which is the greatest problem to have, is the more I do outside of the uniform, like things like this, the more I'm loving it. So that, I am sure, is only going to continue to increase over time. So my guess, well, I don't have an absolute answer for you, I apologize. My guess is that come the 20-year mark, which is in about 4 or so years from now, my guess is I'll be just about ready to hang up the boots and then do, what I do outside the uniform now on a full-time basis.
Awesome. Thank you for that, especially since a lot of our first responders are coming close to retirement and figuring out what they want to do next and finding that next mission and passion in life. So those principles apply to them as well.
Absolutely.
Next question is from Jim Pearson. He says, my son needs to find the goal that you talk about. He seems a bit lost on what his goal could be. I've tried to get him into journaling since he doesn't care to talk about it. When you talk about journaling, what does that mean? Do you journal about your feelings for that day? Do you journal about your goals and how to achieve them? What's your thought? What you're thankful for?
Yeah, this is great, man. And I particularly like talking about this when I'm in, kind of the stereotypical or typical, and then also actual, type A aggressive environments that is, the military, law enforcement, first responders, fire, corrections. Like it's really tough to do these jobs and these professions without that, right? And the idea of journaling within our communities can very easily be seen as soft or weak, or like, I'm a Green Beret. I'm not going to go home and write in my diary. Like, get away from me. Like that is extremely common for someone to be completely adverse to this, which is also part of the reason why I talk about it so often. I'm like, I do it just about every single day. People are like, really? Like people look up at me with this like superhero image, just like one-legged cyborg warrior. And while that is true, I do have one leg and I'm a warrior, but also being open to the fact that this is proven to work, and I'm more than confident and comfortable in being vulnerable with myself and sharing it to the world that, yeah, I do this. I write in a diary, if you want to call it that, just about every single day. How would you attempt to influence him to do that, or how do I journal? If you do want to try to pursue, persuading to your son that there is value in it, it's tough to argue with case studies that show that both from an analytical perspective and from a therapeutic perspective, journaling provides value. I got into journaling purely what began as my training log, right? Me as a typical jock, meathead football player, I used to track all of my fitness stuff, right? Sets in the gym, reps, my calories, my nutrition. That was how I got into what eventually became journaling. It started out as my training log, just documenting what I was doing. And I eventually learned, as I began to do that, year after year after year after year, that I began adding at some point in time, like, how was I feeling? And all this was purely analytical, right? I had zero interest, or there was no intent for me to pursue this from a therapeutic perspective. This is about me becoming bigger, faster, stronger only. Like, how do I do that? I want to know what I just did and what I did 2 months ago so I can be better at it today, so I can be stronger tomorrow. That's it. This is performance based. So that's certainly an angle to take. And the key is just to begin writing. And that's how I began. And as I began looking for more data points to become that much more refined with my analysis, I began documenting how I was feeling towards the end of this log. So it's like grams of chicken, sets and reps on the back squat, blah, 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 hours of sleep. And then it was, tired, lethargic. I feel good, and then that began to just evolve over time. It became what I was gravitating towards most when I would look back on these logs to do some analysis. It was like, okay, cool. I did X weight, X reps, whatever. And then, oh man, I had like 4 days in a row where I was feeling really crappy. Why was I feeling so down? And begin reflecting. So now I'm kind of doing more internal reflection, more internal dialogue. I'm having these conversations with myself. And eventually my training log just morphed into a journal where now they're two separate things. I have my training log, I have my journal. I don't think that there's a wrong way to go about journaling. The things that you asked about, my feelings, absolutely. Like that's without question goes in there. There's a lot of really interesting techniques out there on how to journal. A Google search can show you. I think, words of affirmation are important to put in there, right? Like putting positive thoughts forward, speaking positivity into the universe. And, this sounds like cosmic karma bullshit, but there's like an actual diagnosable reality as it pertains to neurology that demonstrates that by doing so, scientifically actually does spark areas of your brain to turn on and begin functioning. So this is more than just kind of hocus pocus kumbaya stuff. This is like actual real stuff, right? So I think that there's definitely a place for some affirmations within there, and then some internal self-reflection onto like, how am I feeling, or what's going wrong and what's going right. And sometimes for me, man, my journal entry can be 3 pages long. Sometimes it's 3 words long. I set aside anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes. I sit down. Sometimes I sit there staring at the paper for 9, and then I write 5 words in the last 60 seconds. And like, that's my entry. So for me, it's more about remaining disciplined to a particular tool, because there's value, and allowing, my soul really to dictate the direction it needs to go in at that time. So there's plenty of research to done on how to actually structure it, but I would look at it through the lens of affirmations, areas for improvement, and then areas of sustainment. I think that that's like a simple way to go about framing it for someone who's just getting into it.
Awesome. Kevin Thompson's got a question. Tell us the title of your book. I think you got a few of them now, don't you?
Just the one for now, although I am writing 3 other ones. It's wild to realize that you actually have a passion for something at the age of like 37, 38, whatever it was I wrote that. Really, prior to writing, the title of the book is Objective Secure. Prior to deciding I was going to write that, if I was writing, it was because I was being forced to write something, either for school or for work. And there was no fun in it whatsoever. When I decided to write Objective Secure, I realized within the first few weeks that, wow, I actually am, not only am I enjoying this, but I'm becoming like scarily obsessed with it, where I'm like getting out of bed at 2:30 in the morning because I have to just go write, which was weird to experience that then. And it's equally weird to say it now. So it's Objective Secure. The subtitle is The Battle-Tested Guide to Goal Achievement. And I can tell you right now, if you guys are looking for, an autobiography or like the Nick Lavery story, is not what that project is about. It's probably my most frequent piece of, I'll just go ahead and call it negative constructive criticism, is people want, kind of the full memoirs piece. I really haven't been inspired to write that at this point. Yes, there are personal examples and some vignettes and things that I've been through that are in Objective Secure, but really it's just enough to give the reader a little bit of context as to what I was experiencing when I recognized the value of the actual guide that is the book. And the book really just answers the question, how did you do what you did? And it just outlines my process from going through that through the lens of both the mindset and then the strategy that I employed to get back to the team and to continue to serve the way I do now.
So that's called Objective and Secure.
Objective Secure.
And that's, you can find that anywhere.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. We do offer some signed copy options on our website, which is machinenick.com. And I'm actually currently, the audiobook just went live a couple weeks ago. And yes, I narrate it. So if the Boston accent just drives you crazy, do not download it because it's, you're going to get more of this. So that just went live a couple weeks ago, and I'm currently working on the workbook version of it right now.
Awesome. One last question, Nick. We had
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
chat came from Greg Kinsman. He says, "Hi, Nick. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for your service. Do you have any advice on balancing your focus and commitment to your mission/career and your commitment to your family?"
I love that. I love this question. I'm going to answer this. I hope it doesn't sound choreographed, but I've answered this question more than a few times, and it's one of my favorite ones. My inspiration to answer this question comes from a quote from Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, who eventually retired as Lieutenant General, who was a lieutenant colonel during Vietnam. If you've seen the movie We Were Soldiers, starring Mel Gibson plays Colonel Hal Moore, and he's asked at one point essentially this exact question: how do you balance being a good soldier and being a good father and husband? And his answer, which I think is just brilliant, is, well, I'd like to think that being good at the one makes me better at the other. So I do agree with that. I'm going to answer this question in two parts. One is that, and it's really easy to look at what it takes to be a good soldier. And if you apply that to your life as a husband and father, or spouse and a father, spouse and a parent, that's kind of easy for me to comprehend. Work ethic, dedication, discipline, like these tenets and these principles in which make us good soldiers. If you take that and you apply it to your family life, it seems pretty obvious that will help you be better on the family side of things. That is, however, that is a two-way road, and it's the other direction that took me quite a bit of time to grasp. And it's the concepts and values in which make us good parents or spouses or teammates, also enable us to be good soldiers. And these are things like patience, compassion, empathy, kind of some of these like softer skills. These are skills, right? Patience is a skill, and anyone that has kids will attest to this, that it takes time to learn how to be patient, and a kid will teach you that very, very fast. But if you take those and you apply them to your life as a soldier, it's going to make you a better teammate and a better leader, right? So one hand enables the other. One aspect makes you better at the other if you choose to learn from both and apply them to each other and the other one. So they just each become an opportunity to get that 1% better, to remain persistent. The balance between the two, this is its own thing in itself. I could go on for an hour. I'll say this quickly. One is our level of focus is something that we control. It can be difficult, but we decide what we're focused on. You can only focus on one thing at one time, period. That's the way the human brain works, right? Multitasking actually isn't doing multiple things at the same time. It's the ability to quickly refocus fast and then regain that level of focus on the next thing and then execute. Boom, 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 boom. That's what high functioning, high productive people are able to do when they say multitask. We choose what we focus on. Okay. So for those of us with ambition and with careers and professions that we really enjoy and need to excel at, that require an enormous amount of mental, physical, and emotional bandwidth every single day, it can be really difficult to turn that off Whether it's the stress from the day or from the week, or there's a project that you're really into, right? This could be a good problem. It's just not necessarily all negative. Like I had a horrible day and it's crushing me. It could be, man, I got a lot of really good things happening at work right now and I'm excited and I want to get back in there and keep feeding it and growing it. And that happening when you're home, but your mind is somewhere else. You may be physically in the room with your spouse or your kids, but your brain is at work. You're already thinking about that. Or perhaps even worse, you may be on the floor with your son, but you got your phone in your hand and you're answering emails or you're texting your teammate or you're doing whatever. So physically being present, but not actually being present. Like that's a complete and total lack of focus. We all control what that is. So with the same level of tenacity that we go about our professional lives, we owe that to our families to approach them with that same level of tenacity and dedication and focus and attention. When you're there, be there. Unless there is a Scud missile heading towards my house, I don't care what's going on at work right now, right? It doesn't matter. That problem is going to be there tomorrow, okay? And I'll deal with it then. Right now, it's family time, it's mommy, daddy time, or it's daddy, kids time, or it's all family together time. Like this is important, okay? This is important. And there are times, and it can be easy to feel guilty about this, where that becomes actually difficult. And it's understandable, right? It's a good problem to have, is when we're that excited about what we're doing outside of the family, that it's drawing so much of our mental bandwidth and attention, it becomes difficult to focus on our families. It's a good problem to have, but it is a problem, and one that we need to own in terms of the solution. So when you're in that moment, be in the moment, put the phone down, forget about Instagram, good Lord, forget about the emails, all that stuff will still be there. Take advantage of the moments you have now. And then lastly on this is, when we do not have the luxury of quantity, we then have the obligation to increase the quality, okay? When time is limited, which it is, our most limited resource, never, ever will come back. We don't have the luxury of quantity, but let's increase the quality. And quality doesn't need to be a trip to Disney World. Quality is what I just described. If I'm on the floor and we're building a fort with my 5-year-old, that's going to be the best damn fort this whole world has ever seen. Like I am in that moment. This is what matters. That's quality. That's quality. There's an expression my mother uses, is how do kids spell love? It's T-I-M-E. And I mean, I just keep that in my brain and in my soul when I'm in those moments in time. And whether it's my professional life as a service member, or it's my professional life as an entrepreneur and a business owner, both of which I love. But when that time comes for me to be dad or husband or both, that is equally, if not more important. And it's my responsibility to be laser focused on that, the same way I am on all my other ambitions.
Awesome. Nick, thank you so much for being here. This has been amazing. We are over our time, so I want to thank our audience for being here today. And Living a Life of Ethos is the name of this webinar today. So Nick, your presentation today was amazing. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
So just a reminder, everyone, going through a critical incident similar to things that Nick himself had been through, but our first responders also had things like this happen to them every single day. I want you to remind yourself that there are people here for you. There are numbers that you can call. There's people who can be here as a resource for you. Please don't hesitate to dial 1-833-34-STRONG. That's 1-833-347-8766. Or get on your phone or your laptop and get on the web to fst5.org. Find resources that you need, providers that you need in your area. We are here for the entire state of Michigan, first responders in the entire state of Michigan, okay? Fire, police, EMS, corrections, 911 dispatch. We are here for you and your families and the broader community. So we thank you all for being here with us each and every month. And we hope to continue to bring first responders and inspirational individuals like Nick back to everyone. And keep an eye out for our upcoming podcast as well. We will have our podcast starting very soon. And then our webinar will be back to you guys in March, last week of March. Kobe, any lasting thoughts for you?
No, just I want to thank you again, Nick. This was awesome. I love you going talking about the family thing. The wife was looking at me and agreeing with you every bit. So thank you. I do appreciate everything you have done and continue to do. And thank you for doing this for us. This is awesome. And this is what it's about, is networking, making a bigger wave for mental health, and just getting the word out there more.
Yeah, no, guys, I appreciate it. Manisha, Kobe, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, and everyone in this group, sincerely, thank you for what you do, your service, your sacrifices of you and your families that all sacrifice for your ability to live this life of service to your community and those around you. I'll just say in closing quickly, our world, it can become really difficult to raise our hand and say that we've got a problem, because we are the people that are called upon when someone needs help, and we live that. Like, I'm the one that you call when you need help. I'm not the one that says I need help. What makes us great at what we do opens up a massive vulnerability to us because of that. It's the most cliche double-edged sword. What makes us great is also what exposes us to a potential disaster. Not only is there zero shame in recognizing that there's an issue and stepping forward to pursue that, that is quite literally, especially for us, the definition of courage, because it is much easier for us to just keep our head down and just bury it deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. That is what we prefer. That's the path of least resistance. It takes an incredible amount of courage to go against that grain and say, you know what? I don't think I'm doing so great right now. Step one, and then step two, proactively going out and finding it. That takes courage. All right. So anyone out there that feels that, or those of you around you that you see are experiencing that, please express that to them, because that is a huge aspect of why mental health within these demographics, the military, law enforcement, first responder, is such a stigma, is because of the life we live. And we feel that it's a sign of weakness, when in fact, it's the opposite. It's a sign of strength, and it's a sign of courage. So I appreciate what you guys do. Thank you for your time. Good luck. Stay safe.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time.